Hi, good morning everybody. I made that 10 o'clock now, so we'll get started. In case anyone's wondering, by the way, why I've got a cage in the background, that is because we have a relatively new puppy as an addition to the family, and not, as some people have speculated, if the kids misbehave or I misbehave. I'm sure there's a fancy feature somewhere where I can blur that out, but anyway, it's there. That's why. So thanks for joining me today. For those who don't know me, I'm Jonathan. I'm one of the directors here at Jonathan Ford & Co. And this webinar really is a follow-on to the webinar I gave a couple of weeks ago. Only this time I've actually set this one up as a webinar and not a meeting. I had a bit of a technical issue last time. A couple of technical issues on this one before most people arrived, where I didn't realise I was actually on film. But there you go, you live and learn in these times. And the purpose really of today's webinar is to just explore in a bit more detail the government's announcement about companies can furlough themselves, that can furlough their staff and get 80% grants. There's been a lot of debate as to whether the director of a small limited company can actually furlough themselves. So I've read loads of different conflicting things online, and certainly when the announcement was first made in March, it did seem to me and many other people that really it was impossible for a sole director to furlough themselves. It's rather like flying a plane with no one at all at the cockpit. So that's what we're going to look at. If you're watching this and you are not a director of a limited company, somebody self-employed, then you're probably at the wrong webinar today. So I won't be offended if you take that as your cue to leave. So we've got a brief agenda. I hit the right button. Other things we're going to talk about probably take about half an hour, something like that. So hopefully it won't be too much of your morning. So we're going to look at whether it's possible, whether it's moral, what paperwork would be required, what work that you can do whilst you're furloughed, and that's been one of the big areas of debate. How to make a claim, what we know so far, what furloughing options are available to you, what other options are available to you, and then also I'll try and do some questions and answers at the end. So if you're used to doing webinars, you should be able to see somewhere on your controls a Q&A button. And if you've got any questions that you want to ask, then feel free to put those on, and I'll try and do them at the end. And you know, if it's something I can answer. So moving on. Is it possible? So the first bit of good news is that yes, it is possible. HMRC have confirmed in their latest guidance, which was issued 4th of April, that directors can furlough themselves. You do need to be on a UK payroll as at the 28th of February, and it's going to be based on your salary figure at the 28th of February. So for most directors, they're paying themselves a sort of relatively small salary, sort of like £700–800 a month, and the scheme has been announced that it will initially last for 3 months. So 3 months 700 times by 80%, and what you're looking at is possibly a grant claim of about £1,700 as things stand at the moment. So the Chancellor did say that he would extend the scheme if that was necessary. So we'll have to wait and see really just how the whole crisis develops. And then finally, you can't do any work for your company whilst you're furloughed, and that is something that we will cover a little bit more as part of today's presentation. So a few words about morality. And you might be thinking that you didn't really sign up for a webinar with a chartered accountant for a lecture on morality. But I do think this is important. What we've got at the moment is the government's intention to support employers to pay staff rather than see mass redundancies and businesses closing. And so what's then happened is HMRC have issued guidance as to how they believe the scheme will work. But this, by its very nature, has all been rushed. Everything has been rushed out. And when this all comes to an end, and it will, then we're going to have to look at really what the initial government intention was, because what the government intended to do is ultimately how HMRC will end up policing it. And so what I put on the slide here is the very first line on the coronavirus job retention scheme guidance. And so the very first line says, if you cannot maintain your current workforce because your operations have been severely affected by coronavirus, you can furlough employees and apply for a grant. And I've highlighted 2 bits. So this is my highlighting. It's not in the actual text itself. And I've highlighted the cannot and the severely affected, because there are 2 conditions really that the government are looking as being relevant here. That this grant isn't something that they're seeing as being there to support businesses who actually can maintain their current operations, that they've got the money to do it. And also the severely affected is there because not all businesses have been severely affected. I mean, you might be sitting watching this thinking, well, your business is shut down, you can't do anything. But there's plenty of businesses out there which are actually carrying on as normal, and businesses that are actually thriving as a result. So I do feel that when the day of reckoning comes and grant claims are being looked at, the HMRC are very much going to be mindful about the original government intention, which is that it's there to support businesses that literally are going to go under without this sort of support. So I do feel that if businesses have ultimately applied for this grant and they're not, they could have continued to maintain their operations or they haven't been severely affected, then maybe the sort of checking that HMRC are going to be doing into the grant claims might be a little bit more robust if they've already sort of broken the spirit really of what the support was for. And a final word really just on the sort of morality of it is that I think, many people, many accountants almost see the tax system as a bit of a game to play with the tax man. And I think the way we need to view this support is a bit differently. I think although it's HMRC that's operating it, we really need to see it as part of the benefits system. And I don't think people would have the same view about say signing on for the dole whilst they're working, that they view that in the same way as maybe getting a few expenses through their accounts that were slightly grey. But I think the ultimate conclusion when HMRC are auditing these grant claims will be that they will be quite strict with them, and I think they will feel that they have got the moral high ground to do this. And we've all seen in the press this last week about football clubs who are planning on furloughing staff who now have in Liverpool's case have reversed their decision to do that on the basis that actually it just wasn't in the spirit of what this was intended. These are wealthy clubs, and they're sort of falling at the hurdle of, well, they actually could maintain their workforce. So please just bear that in mind that we are in a crisis at the minute, but there's going to come a point when grant claims are going to have to be made, and I think you need to be making sure that you are not just following the letter of the guidance, but really also following the spirit of what was intended for this support. So moving on to what paperwork is required, and the paragraph that I put on the slide there, this is just copied and pasted straight from HMRC's guidance that they issued on the 4th. The basic step where a company considers that it's in compliance with its statutory duties, one or more of its individual salaries, the board can decide that such director should be furloughed. So again, confirmation that it's okay for a director to be furloughed. Were one or more individual directors furloughed decided by the board, this should be formally adopted as a decision of the company, noted in the company records and communicated in writing to the directors concerned. So that for me is saying that there's 2 bits of paper that need to be generated here. Firstly, there's a board minute where you're actually documenting the board decision, and secondly, that there's then a letter going out to the director. And this all might feel a little bit weird when you are the only director, but we can only look at the guidance that's been issued. This has been issued by HMRC. They know that this guidance is going out to lots of people who are sole directors, and if they are saying that it should be formally adopted, noted in the records and communicated in writing, then I think it's not unrealistic for us to expect that that is evidence that HMRC are expecting that's going to be done and retained, and if they are auditing a grant claim, that they're going to want to see that. So we've actually got copies of a sample board minute on our website. So if you go to our homepage, right at the top, you'll see a sort of COVID-19 support link, and you go there. There's tons of stuff, not just on this, but on all the support available. So we've got a copy of the board minute, we've got a copy of furlough agreement. And what I'd suggest you do is that if you are going to furlough yourself, you do actually spend a couple of minutes. That's all it will take to actually fill those in, and then sign them, scan them, email them over to us, and then that is it. You've got your evidence, and it's if you do get audited, it's all going to be there and it's all going to be in place. I know there's a tendency to think about sort of backfilling this kind of stuff and think, well, if HMRC do investigate, then you'll do it then. But going back to my earlier point about this being sort of probably seen a bit more like the benefit system than going back and backdating information that wasn't there at the time, potentially could get seen as fraud. So for the sake of doing it now, I don't really see any point in not doing that. So moving on to what you can do whilst you're furloughed, and this is probably one of the areas that's had most debate. And again, I've lifted out exactly what HMRC are saying in their latest guidance. I will point out that this guidance is a real movable feast. So this is about the 5th update to the guidance that we've seen since it came out. It's only been out for a couple of weeks. So what HMRC have said is, where furlough directors need to carry out particular duties to fulfill the statutory obligations they owe to their company, they may do so, provided that that they do no more than would be reasonably judged necessary for that purpose. For instance, they should not do work of any kind they would carry out in normal circumstances to generate commercial revenue or provide services to or on behalf of the company. The key word for me in all of that is the word necessary. And I don't think you need to just think about it as being necessary, but necessary to actually do it whilst you are furloughed. So if it's something that can wait until you're not furloughed, then I think the expectation is that you would wait. I'm going to go through a list now of a few things that I think are okay. Now, there is a health warning with this. the things I've listed on this slide are things that I think are okay, and that's me judging it on my experience, what I think the government intention is, what I think is reasonable, what I think is necessary, and just the general sort of tone of advice that's out there at the minute. So this is not official. This isn't something that in 6 weeks' time, I want somebody emailing me with a copy of it saying, you said it was okay. This is my best effort at what I think is okay. So I think it's okay to continue to run a payroll and pay staff. And that's simply because that is a necessity. If you don't pay your staff who are furloughed, even if that's including yourself, then you are opening yourself up to actually being sued by staff. So running payroll, paying staff is okay. Directors have a responsibility to maintain books and records, so I think continuing to do your bookkeeping and administration around the bookkeeping, that's not general administration, is okay. So that would include maybe paying suppliers, banking checks. Training I've put on the list, and that is actually doing it yourself as opposed to giving training. The government have specifically said that doing training whilst you're on furlough is okay. So my first feeling would have been that training actually wasn't okay, but that is actually specifically listed on the guidance as being something that's okay. Directors have responsibilities to file accounts at Companies House and to do confirmation statements. So again, I don't see any issue in doing those. I've ticked this one, but updating your website and auto replies to say the business is temporarily closed. Well, maybe that's something you do as the last thing you do before you're on furlough. The government have also said that volunteering, so being an NHS volunteer or something like that, whilst you're on furlough is okay. I was thinking sort of trying to, like a real world example, and the one that sprung to my mind, and I know I doubt there's that many people watching who are shopkeepers, but shopkeepers seem like a good example. So you can't be furloughed and open your shop and run your shop. So that's sort of fairly self-evident. I don't think you could be furloughed and have your shop closed, but sort of like refurbish it whilst it's shut, paint it and decorate and everything. Because that isn't necessary to do whilst you're furloughed. You could do that at any point. But if you got a call from the police saying the alarm's going off, the window's been smashed, and you go out and organise it being boarded up, then that for me is then necessary. You couldn't really wait until you are till your furlough period had ended. So I think just keep that necessity in mind, both in terms of necessary for you to do it and necessary for you to do it now, as opposed to at a later date. A few things I've listed that I don't think are going to be okay. So supplying services as well. That is totally exactly what you shouldn't be doing whilst you're furloughed. But I don't think you should be doing activities to generate new business, or to be commissioning suppliers to actually do things. So if you're thinking, well, I'll take the opportunity to get my website redesigned or something like that, then I think that is doing work for the company. And maintaining like your social media accounts and things whilst you're furloughed, again, for me, isn't the isn't what they're looking for. I think you need to think as well that if you do have if we do see HMRC inspections into these grant claims, and we will, the sort of evidence that they're going to be looking at is things like they'll look at companies' social media pages. They can look they could look at email records to see what emails were coming in and out. They could ask to see diaries about what, whether you were doing work. They could look at invoices that you've received in that period to see whether that was that you were clearly carrying on your business. If you're running company vehicles, they could look at whether you're claiming for fuel in that period of time that you're furloughed. So I think there's plenty of stuff that they could look at to make a case to say you actually weren't furloughed and that you were carrying on to working for the company. I've got a slide up here. This is section 172 of the Companies Act, and the reason I put this up is I have seen a post sort of doing the rounds on social media, which is basically sort of putting two and two together, maybe coming up with a higher answer than 4. And the post that's doing the round, it's a blog post that is on the Companies House website, and it does talk about directors' duties. And one of the main director duties is this section 172, which is a duty to promote the success of the company. And particularly if you look at things like paragraph C there, the need to foster the company's business relationships with suppliers, customers and others. I think there is some people feeling that this might be a bit of a, almost a loophole to say, well, HMRC have said you can carry on doing director duties, and a director duty is to promote the success of the company, and the Companies Act says that we need to foster business relationships with suppliers, customers and others. So I can do all of those things. I don't know for certain, but my feeling is that, again, we're just back to this necessity, and that if you're going to be furloughed, it's got to be necessary, not just to do those things, but to do those things in your furloughed period. So making a claim, so HMRC are building, apparently from scratch, a brand new portal to be able to make a claim, and this is something that the businesses that want to claim the grant will have to do. So it's not automatic. Claimant will need to make it. We need to see as accountants what's actually involved in making the claim ourselves. So that's not something anybody knows yet. We're expected that the portal will be ready by the end of April. That might be a little bit optimistic. We don't know at the minute whether agents like ourselves will actually be able to do that on behalf of clients. A lot of the wording in the guidance does suggest that it isn't going to be an agent thing, although that would be surprising given so many businesses do rely on accountants and payroll bureaus to do their payroll. One thought there is that many businesses don't actually have their own pay-as-you-earn login with companies, with HMRC, and because they don't need it, because we do everything. So it might be worth actually, if you go on the HMRC website, if you Google pay-as-you-earn online services, and you actually you get set up your own pay-as-you-earn login. There's a postal element to that, which is about 10 days. But my thinking is that why not do that? Because if we find out when the portal finally is launched that we can't do that claim for you, and then you have to register and jump through the hoops to get your own pay-as-you-earn online services account, then that's going to delay making your claim for a couple of weeks. So I would suggest that that you get that done now. There's no harm. It's not going to interfere with anything that we do, and it might save you a bit of time. The final thing I would just say on making the claim, I mean, I've alluded to it before, but it's in black and white in the detail that HMRC do retain the right to audit retrospectively all aspects of a claim. So we need to see obviously exactly what the claim process is going to be like, but I think they are going to be keen to process claims quickly and pay out and then ask questions later. So you know, the fact that you've made the claim and got the money, you know, isn't always going to be the end of the story. So in terms of options, I think the thing to keep in mind at the moment is the decision to furlough and the decision to make a claim are actually two different decisions. So the very fact that you decide to furlough yourself now doesn't mean that you then have to make a claim. So I see really four options. Option one is that you don't furlough and that you carry on as normal, and you know, certainly that's what I'm doing. We're continuing to run our business and continuing to work, so I'm not contemplating furloughing myself, and it might be that you could draw that same conclusion today, that you are going to carry on as normal. I spoke to one of my clients who is a wedding photographer running their own limited company, and he was saying that for the sort of £1,700–1,800 that he might get as a grant, he'd rather just work hard at developing his business and getting everything sort of lined up so that he can be as productive as possible when things get back to normal. So obviously, wedding photographer, no weddings happening. He's not doing any actual income generating work in the sense that he's not taking any pictures at weddings at the moment, but he's decided that he'd rather not have the £1,700 and he just wants to crack on. So a second option would be to furlough now and to do nothing. And some people know that they're in that situation, that there is nothing going on, no work to do at all, and yeah, absolutely, you know, unquestionable that they can furlough themselves. The third one is probably you know, my best advice really, and one way of trying to sort of maximise your position whilst doing things both to the letter of the guidance and also really in the spirit of the guidance, and that would be to, if you've got no work, to furlough yourself now. That can be backdated to the beginning of March if you weren't doing any work, but the minimum period that you can be furloughed for is 3 weeks. So if you furlough yourself, you could be furloughed for 3 weeks and genuinely do nothing, and then have a break in your furlough. There's no guidance as to how long the break needs to be. So my feeling would be, you know, without having a furlough break for an hour would probably be not quite in the spirit, but having a furlough break for a few days where you actually then do focus on your business, you do have a bit of a blitz, getting things done, and then you can re-furlough yourself. So if you want to make a claim, a furlough period can't be less than 3 weeks, but there's no reason why you couldn't have 3 weeks furloughed, a few days not furloughed, 3 weeks furloughed, a few days not furloughed, and then you are maximising your ability really to make a claim while still actually being able to, you know, to do something for your business periodically. And then the fourth option that I've listed is to furlough now and then just do whatever you feel is the right thing to do for your business. You can furlough now, you do the paperwork now, and then when it comes to making a claim, you can then look hand on heart as to whether you feel that you could make that claim based on the requirements of the claim when they're actually published. So 4 options for you to pick from. My favourite one really, I suppose, is the option 3, and that's the sort of reviewing one. Just for the sake of completeness, I've just listed a few other things that are outside really of the scope of what I'm talking about today, and that is just some other options that are available. So you're still able to defer your VAT if you've got a VAT bill. So the VAT bill that fall before the end of June, you can automatically defer those to the end of March. If you've got income tax payments account due in July, you can defer those. If you've got other taxes, corporation tax or old VAT arrears or pay as you earn, then you can ask for time to pay. The anecdotal evidence coming out is that the time to pay people are being far less aggressive about that. You can do a review on business and personal costs. Again, on our website, we've got a basic cash flow planner. You can apply for a coronavirus business interruption loan. Again, when they very first were announced, they had a few clauses which meant that it was virtually impossible to get one. I think it was at the end of last week, they relaxed things a bit. And again, the evidence coming out now is that these are far more easy to actually obtain, which was the whole point. You can take a mortgage holiday. Again, on our website, we've got a spreadsheet which we've been provided with. It's not something we've done, which just shows the attitude of various mortgage lenders. So, you know, there's a few other bits there to consider. I will have a quick look at the questions and answers. I appreciate people might have asked some things as we've gone along, so there might be things that they've asked and I've already covered. So bear with me 1 second. Will we get the slides at the end? So the answer to that is yeah, if you want them. I'm also, when I'm trying to record it, I did try to record the last one and failed miserably. I checked that this one was recording and I believe it is, so I will try and make the whole recording available as well. Hi John, if there's 2 directors, can you both be furloughed? So going back to the webinar that I did 2 weeks ago, at that point I was saying if you had 2 directors, I didn't see any problem in furloughing one, but I did see a problem in furloughing both of them. But that opinion now of mine has changed on with the latest guidance. So I don't see any problem with you furloughing both directors, provided that you follow the advice I've said today regarding you know, getting all the paperwork in place, doing it within the spirit of what's intended, and only doing work that is necessary. Rather than unnecessary, as in it has to be done whilst you're furloughed, rather than it can wait. Working on site I'm working on in may or may not open earlier than expected. Can you come out of the furlough agreement early? Yeah, absolutely. So that would be probably sort of the option 4 that I listed, where you furlough yourself now, and then if the phone rings and you know, you get a call and somebody says, you know, you're back on site, can you come out of it early, then that's fine. You make your decision, you go back to work. You would be able to make a claim then for the period that you were furloughed for, provided that period is no less than 3 weeks. Can you give any guidance on the rules about backdating claims to 1st of March, generally as well as directors? Thanks, that's quite a nice hard one. Yeah, I mean, this is quite a hard area really, because what we had was the announcement about the job retention scheme was made on the 20th of March, and within that announcement was the right to backdate a furloughing claim to the 1st of March. I think that is relatively easy to do if you were a business and you've got employees and you shut that business, or you told those employees to go home, and then what you've actually got is 20 days after you told them, you now discover that you've got the right to furlough them. So in that case, the paperwork is sort of catching up with the reality. But the reality would be they have been sent home and they're not there. I think it is a harder thing to do if you are a director of a limited company, being perfectly honest, because if you're trying to sort of tick that box for only doing what was absolutely necessary, how could you have been doing that when you didn't even know that this existed? So I don't want to say that it's impossible for a director to be furloughed before from the 1st of March, but I think it's probably unlikely that a sole director could make that case. So hopefully that's answered the question to some extent, but I appreciate that's quite a woolly answer, really. Do cancellation fees apply as still doing business? So what the question is, do cancellation fees still apply as doing business? I'm not entirely sure just about that one. So if you want to just drop me an email, then we can explore that one in a bit more detail. Where can I find your letter templates and spreadsheet on the website? So the website's on the slide at the minute. On the main website, if you go into the home page, there's a link within the text saying COVID-19 help. If you click that link, it is a bit of a hodgepodge of stuff that we've updated as and when we've we've come across something useful, and both of those things should be there. If we furlough dating back a few weeks to March, do we backdate our meeting to the same date? No, I would put your meeting, date your meeting at the date that you've done it, and make a note that it's recognised that the date that it was effective from. So yeah, not a big fan for this for backdating things to the actual meeting, but I think that you could have your meeting to say, it was meeting was held to formally document the decision to furlough such and such body with effect from X date. Pay ourselves a combination of salary and dividends each month. Can we continue to pay monthly dividends to a furloughed director? Absolutely. So provided that the company's got sufficient profit to pay a dividend, which is always the rule, then there's no problem paying a dividend. So I haven't got an issue with that one. How do we know the furlough claim end date, as we don't know when the lockdown will end? So when it comes to making a claim, part of the claim will be when furlough started, and part of the claim will be when the furlough ended. So I think by the time you're making a claim, or what ultimately might be claims, you'll know that date. If the lockdown goes on for months and months, then it might be that you're making it, that when you're making a claim, that there's a box to tick to say it's still continuing, or that you're claiming for a period from the start date to now. But yeah, I don't think there's going to be an expectation that we'll have to predict when it's going to end. I've got my puppy in the background just making seagull noise. We reduce pay for now and carrying on, but if we run out of things to do in the next few months, could we furlough later? And if so, will the 80% still be based on the Fed pay? So yeah, the only guidance that we've got in terms of basing the pay is that it's based on Feb. So I think that is the that is the point in time that we're going to have to consider. If you run out of things to do, then yeah, at that point you would furlough yourself, and provided that your furlough period is not less than 3 weeks, then you'd be able to trigger a claim. Which I'm getting more. I think my rate of questions is actually going up quicker than I'm answering them, but that's good, because I do want to cover as much stuff as possible for people. If you're on a contract that was ended because of COVID-19, do you furlough from the first day after that contract ended? So the answer, I suppose, is possibly, because when that contract ended, that might be when you stopped doing anything for your company. It would very much depend on the nature of the work that you're trying to do after that contract ended. So if the contract ended and you spent a week phoning up people, sending emails out, going on LinkedIn, trying to promote new business for yourself, then I don't think you could say that you have been furloughed. But if the contract ended and the nature of the work that you do is such that if you're not working on a contract, you are doing nothing, then I don't see any reason why you can't furlough yourself the day, the day after that contract ended. So again, it's just thinking about that list of things that I said are okay to do, and the list of things that I said aren't okay to do, and thinking, well, is your activity falling, into the can do it or falling into the can't do it. One of our 2 directors stopped receiving a salary in December, similar to furlough or maybe zero. He remains employed by the company without a salary. Based on the government guidance, it looks as if we can base on the Feb 2019 salary. So on the government guidance, that if you've not got a reference point for Feb 2020, then you can look at the comparative year for Feb last year. So as part of the slides, I put a link to all of the detailed guidance. I've just picked out a few sort of snapshots of it to talk about today. But yeah, that is my understanding. There's nothing I know that would contradict that one. I think we've just got a few more. So, isn't one of the main objectives of the furlough scheme to compensate for lost income, and now due to the unnecessary lockdown, can no longer receive revenue and therefore income. So why is it wrong to claim? So we've got a number of different schemes going on. One of the schemes which is out there, which is not something I've talked about today, which is a scheme for the self-employed. And the self-employed scheme is all about replacing lost income. So that's what it's been designed to do. That's what it's aiming to do. And whether it's the comparative between what's offered to limited companies and what's offered to self-employed people, whether that is fair or unfair, that is what we've got. So the scheme that's available for limited companies is not a scheme to replace lost income. And you might feel that it should be, but it isn't. The scheme that we've got for small companies is basically the coronavirus job retention scheme. And so what it's designed to do is to basically enable companies to not lay off their workforce and make them redundant or basically close down. So that's what it's aiming to do. So it's not wrong. I don't believe it's wrong to claim. I think you just need to make sure that the spirit of what this particular scheme is aimed to do, which is to allow companies who cannot pay their staff as a result of a severe disruption to coronavirus to actually pay their staff. So I've tried to really just focus on making sure that the people who are going to be claiming under the scheme are doing it in a compliant way. And I appreciate that if you're running a small limited company, then all of your income might have dried up. The ability to claim 1,700 quid compared to the income that's dried up might be an absolute drop in the ocean. But that is one for politicians, unfortunately, and not one that I can necessarily solve. We've got, if you don't furlough, can you sign on to universal credit as an alternative? Well, certainly universal credit has been trumpeted by the government as the thing to try and supplement people's income. So the benefit system is not something that, as an accountant, we do tend to get involved in very often. So my advice to anyone will be, that investigating a universal credit claim has got to be worth looking into. You can, because of the crisis, it is something that you can do online over the phone, as opposed to visiting like Job Centre Plus and things. So yeah, the answer to that one really would be, why not have a look at a universal credit claim? I suppose that if you don't furlough, can you sign on? I suppose that if you don't furlough, then and you stop paying yourself, then you get no income at all. So then you might be able to get universal credit. If you don't furlough, continue to pay yourself, then obviously you have got an income coming in, which is going to affect your universal credit amount. The grant covers 80% of salary, but in theory, can we just continue to pay to the furlough director as normal and just not be able to claim it back? We don't actually need to change anything from a wage point of view. Absolutely. So the furlough, the payroll bit for paying yourself and the furlough claim for claiming a grant are two separate activities. So absolutely carry on paying yourself, not a problem. Make a grant claim if you think you can. Don't make a grant claim if you don't think you're eligible. The two things are mutually exclusive, so there's absolutely no problem just cracking on as normal. You wouldn't change anything. If you furlough yourself and you're going to be claiming, you're thinking you're going to claim 80%, then again, you just pay yourself exactly the same amount of money as normal. Nothing changes in the payroll. That all carries on. And then when the claim portal is open, that's when we're going to be looking at the actual requirements for making a claim, and at that point, we judge whether and you judge whether you're going to be eligible for claim based on everything that you've been doing or not doing. I've got one more question here. Can the letter on the website furlough an employee be backdated for the start of the furlough? What I would do is I would date the letter on the date that you do it, and I just refer in the letter to the date that the furlough period started. I don't really see any problem with that. You've then got documentation, you've got a clear understanding. I just don't think that when HMRC have issued guidance saying you must have paperwork that says that this is the situation, that it makes a lot of sense to then not have that paperwork. So we've got like 3 dates really. We've got the 20th of March when the scheme was announced. We've got the 1st of March when it was that you could backdate it to, and we've got the 4th of April when this guidance came out. We can't, no one can predict the future. We can only do our best with the information that we have as we come to know what it is. So I don't think that anybody who's got, who has a HMRC inspection around their grant, who an inspector says, can I see your evidence of this in writing, and they've got written evidence, the evidence is dated today, saying you were furloughed from this particular date. I don't really think that those people are going to have a big issue with HMRC saying you've not got the correct paperwork, because it's only over the last couple of days that we've become aware of what was required. So yeah, I wouldn't backdate the minute, but maybe backdate when the furlough started in the actual text on the minute, so that you are referring to the furlough period starting on a particular date. So that's all the questions. So hopefully you've found it useful. I will carry on doing webinars for different things as long as I feel that people are getting some benefit from them. We'll send emails out if we're doing more. Hopefully, hopefully you find it useful, and everyone carry on, stick at it. Some of the news seems to be slightly brighter some days than others, so hopefully we won't be doing this forevermore. Thanks again for your time, and I'll speak to you all soon.